wife and stepdaughter wanted to move into her ex's house. But I refused since I was uncomfortable with the idea, and they abandoned me for many weeks. Now they've returned, but it's too late. My wife Allison and stepdaughter Hannah have been living with me for the past 3 years. Allison, 42, and I, 46, started dating 5 years ago and were married 2 years ago. Hannah is 16 and Allison has had full care of her daughter since their divorce 12 years ago. Allison and her ex were high school sweethearts who married as soon as they finished college, but Allison informed me that they were not meant to be together. Her ex was incredibly ambitious, and once they married, he began to take her for granted, spending little time at home. She sought marriage counseling as well, but nothing changed, and the couple split. So after 6 years of marriage, she decided to end it and seek full custody of their child, because she did not believe he was capable of parenting her alone when she was not with him. And she was right. So he didn't protest and accepted on seeing her on weekends. Allison then decided to relocate for better opportunities around 3 years after her divorce, which is how she came to be with me. She got a job here, where I am from, and it is just a 6-hour drive from her hometown, so she can see her parents whenever she wants, and her ex can come see their daughter on weekends. Her ex was not thrilled with her decision to transfer since it would make it more difficult for him to visit his child, and their relationship had deteriorated more since she moved here. The final nail in the coffin was when she married me. After that, he hardly spoke to her unless it was about Hannah, so it wasn't surprising that he didn't provide anything for her in his will, which only named Hannah. Allison and I had expected this because their relationship had not ended well. When her ex was first diagnosed with heart problems, she tried to bury the hatchet and be there for him, but he declined her attempts to be his friend, so she did not push any tougher as it was evident that he didn't want her in his life, and we attempted to keep our distance from him in the later stages. But when we discovered that Dad had given Hannah the house, she and Allison began to rejoice, which puzzled me because we already had a place to live, and that was my home here. The house her ex had left was all the way back in their hometown, and they were talking about moving into it, something I was uncomfortable with and informed them of, sparking the entire argument. The lawyer informed Hannah and her mother that when she turned 18, they started planning their future and spoke about what they were going to do with the house and how they were going to renovate it. They had received a plethora of photographs from the lawyer, and I could see that it was far larger than the house we were currently living in, but this house was mine, and my entire existence revolved around it. So, before they could let their imaginations run wild, I decided to burst their bubble by telling them that I was uneasy with the notion of moving to this new house and leaving everything behind. That surprised them a little. I'm not sure why, considering that they should have anticipated it. Allison attempted to encourage me to sell the property and accompany them to their homeland, because she had lived here for some years and missed her family and old acquaintances. She'd spent so many years with me that it was my job to make some sacrifices for her and move with them. I thought it was unfair of her to make that comparison because when she traveled here, she had no clue she would meet me. She had moved here for herself, not for me, and when I brought it up with her, she just grew unhappy with me. She and Hannah had already decided they wanted to go, so they didn't want to hear me out, but rather encourage me to join them. We struggled for a few days, but then they just informed me that they were going to check out the home and live there. They were there for a few days to test things, and if I wanted to come, I could, but if I didn't, they wouldn't wait for me. They left after that, which was painful for me since I felt abandoned just because I refused to move into that house. If I'm being honest, one of the primary reasons I wasn't thrilled about moving there was because it used to be Allison and her ex-husband's previous home when they lived together. Apparently he repurchased it a few years ago when he had the funds, despite the fact that he had not lived there. He owned it, perhaps for emotional reasons. I'd feel like an alien if I lived there, and most importantly, my entire family. My friends lived here, and I did not want to forsake them. My business was also located here, so leaving everything behind would be problematic. Anyway, a few days after learning about the property, Allison and Hannah packed their stuff and departed without me after I told them I wasn't interested in seeing it. I was unhappy when they left, but I tried not to express it because I didn't think they would care in the first place. It wasn't until they left that I allowed myself to cry, and then I informed my parents what had happened, and they had no solution for me. They had assured me that they would only be gone for a few days, but it had been nearly 2 weeks and I had not heard from them. They had not only abandoned me, but also ceased interacting with me completely. Followed our dispute. It broke my heart. I had intended to meet with Allison when they returned from their holiday home and try to work things out with her, but after more than 10 days of no communication, I began to doubt my decision. On the 12th day, I called my lawyer and told them that it could be time to file divorce papers since I couldn't think of another way out of this. Fortunately, my lawyer is an old friend of mine, and he recommended that I meet with Allison. When she returned, call her before filing for divorce. So I decided to wait for her to return so that we could at least converse and give our relationship another chance before calling it off. 2 days later, Sarah arrived with Hannah in the evening, both of them looking quite agitated. I invited them in and enabled them to talk with me, believing they were there to apologize for all that had happened. Instead, she just informed me that they had chosen to put the thought of relocating into that. The house was put on hold for the time being since there was a lot of work to be done, and the photographs the lawyer had showed them were clearly from a long time ago, because when they visited the house in person, it looked nothing like that. For several minutes they chatted about the house and nothing else, and the more they talked about themselves, the worse I felt since, like a fool, I had let them in expecting an apology. At the very least, I expected them to own their errors. Apparently, the house was in pretty bad shape. None of the facilities operated correctly. There were plenty of bats, bird droppings on the floor. Several mice and other critters had made homes within the house. Worst of all, there looked to be a major termite infestation. Everything was pretty nasty, and it was evident that no one had looked after the house while the owner, her ex, was abroad. So that was one of the reasons they couldn't move in right now. Even throughout their 2-week stay, they had to reside with Allison's parents. The only reason they did not return after the first night was to debate with the lawyer whether they would be able to get ownership of the house, which there was no provision for in the will. And until then, the lawyer would handle the trust for her, and Hannah would only legally possess the house until she reached the age of 18, at which point she would be free to move in whenever she wanted. Allison and the lawyer had been speaking for 2 weeks because she wanted to move in as soon as possible, preferably by the end of the year, but this was just a few months ago, and the will was still being probated. That is why they decided to return home clearly. It was not the best time for them to move in. After they revealed everything to me, I told Allison that I was relieved she had found a place to live since I no longer wanted to live with her. I informed her that she had been incredibly rude and disrespectful to me and my feelings, and that she had not apologized for anything, so I requested her to go. She was surprised when I stated it and directed Hannah to. We met in her room to talk in person. When we were alone, I explained that I had only let her and Hannah in because I expected them to apologize. I could still ignore Hannah since she was a child, but Allison was an adult who knew what she was doing. The only reason she contacted me was because the residence was no longer livable. If the house had been in good condition, she would not have bothered to contact me, and we would most likely be divorced right now, since I would not change my mind about transferring, and it was obvious that she would not either. So, with that in mind, I felt it was best for us to part ways now rather than wait for the future and go our own ways later. When I mentioned this, she raged at me, accusing me of being unfair and ignorant. She told me I was the one who wanted to divorce, and that I was prepared to abandon our marriage and relationship for something so small, meaning that I was not committed to us. She noted again how she had spent so many years living with me, close to my family and friends, and that the least she could ask of me was to spend some time in her hometown with her family and friends, so she could be closer to them. But I'd let her down, which was really selfish of me, especially now. I threatened to leave and push her out because they refused to apologize for anything that was not their fault. I attempted to argue with her, but she was having none of it and began yelling at me. She labeled me, an dreadful human being for failing to grasp her feelings, and then responding as if she was the perpetrator here. They even labeled me a crybaby since I couldn't even man up and be there for my wife and children, therefore I earned the title. Finally, she told me that if I genuinely wanted her and Hannah out of my life, they would gladly go. But she simply wanted me to understand that my actions were weak and selfish. I selfishly declined to accompany her to her birthplace, despite the fact that she had lived in my city for quite some time, but I don't think it's the same. But it was incredibly cowardly since she seems to feel that I should have been there for her and Hannah. But I was so caught up in my own sentiments that I didn't care about theirs. And since I couldn't deal with the reality that they had opposing viewpoints, I tried to make them the villains and myself the victim. She had already packed her backpack when she returned, so all she had to do was pick up Hannah and the two of them went. After that, I couldn't bring myself to call them, but I know they're now staying with a friend of hers. Her friend contacted me to let me know they were there and that both of them were upset with me, so if I wanted to clear things up, I had better do it right away. 2 days have passed and I haven't been able to do anything quickly because I don't know what to do. AITA for wanting to leave my wife because she wants to return to her homeland right now. Update 1. Okay, so I went through the comments and wanted to thank everyone who took the time to leave a comment and provide me advice. After reading these comments, I decided to spend some more time contemplating what I truly wanted to pursue. I doubt Allison and Hannah would have called me again, because everything I said in my earlier post was true. The house was in better repair, and they were able to resolve any legal issues. And that's what's really irritated me. They wouldn't have called me if everything was well in another location. I don't want to be their fallback option, if that makes sense. And frankly, I have nothing against Hannah, she is only a child. I've watched her mature over the previous several years, and she still has a long way to go, so I'm not upset with her. But Allison has a different story. She is a mature lady, and I'm not sure what to think of her. She feels I am blaming her and painting her as the bad guy, but I believe she is doing the same to me, and she is gaslighting me into believing I am the villain in this circumstance. She's always rejecting my feelings, and the fact that she's labeled me a crybaby, a selfish person, a coward, and so on has made it really tough for me to deal with everything alone. I'm not sure how to handle the issue, and I feel terrible for all of us right now, because over the past many years we've been one happy family, but I can see that family disintegrating. I didn't want it to happen, but I had no option. She insulted me, and if she comes back and really apologizes for everything, I'm prepared to work things out. I genuinely love and care for her, and I will do anything to get our relationship back on track, but she must take the initiative and at least try to show me that she cares as well. It doesn't seem to feel that way. She hasn't contacted me since she left and acts as if I don't exist. I last heard from her over 2 weeks ago, before any of this started, and neither she nor Hannah have spoken to me since. So I'm at a loss for what to do. I want things to succeed, but she must feel the same way. Until then, we'll just be stranded here. Report 2. It has been a week since my last report, and Allison and Hannah returned this afternoon. Once again, I was foolish enough to assume that they were going to make things right with me. But when I opened the door, Allison informed me that they had only come to pack the remaining belongings that they had left here. They had even brought a pickup truck and a friend to help them get home, so I knew they were serious. I was so miserable because I was just waiting for Allison to talk to me, to give me a sign that maybe things weren't as bad as we thought, and that we might still rescue our marriage. Instead, she was prepared to give up so easily, so I decided to meet with her privately and tell her that I was really angry with the way she handled situations. We had been together for a few years, and I thought we were stronger than this, so I couldn't understand her actions. She just appeared resigned when she spoke to me, and she told me that she was weary of battling with me, and it didn't make her happy to be leaving me in this manner, but she also believed that I owed her an apology. And I knew if I tried to argue with her about it, we'd end up going in circles again. Because she thought I owed her an apology for not being there for her, and I felt the same way, but only for her. Instead of going down that road again, I told her that whatever had happened was past, and all we could do was try to move on. However, we owed it to one another to give our relationship another opportunity, and a real fighting chance at that. I expected her to agree, but instead she told me that she was really disappointed that things had turned out this way, but that given everything that had happened, she didn't feel that giving our relationship another try would work. She finally decided to return to her hometown to spend time with her family and friends. She had had enough of living here and planned to return in a few months. So it wasn't just about the house she planned to return, and the home acted as a catalyst for that decision. I'll have to recognize. That caught me off guard because I had expected it to be about the house rather than wanting to relocate back. I could not promise her anything since I wasn't sure whether I was ready. I wondered if I'd ever be able to accompany her to her homeland. So when she told me that this was the real reason, she explained that she hadn't contacted me in the previous weeks because staying with her parents for the next 2 weeks made her feel like she was missing out on a lot of time with them, and she wanted to be closer to them. But she knew I wouldn't want to move back with her. She had disagreed with me and finally attempted to hate me, but she couldn't bring herself to do it after realizing I had a point. To be honest, I assumed she wanted to move back because of the house and that it was just a phase, but hearing her admit that she wanted to move back because she wanted to be close to everything she knew made me wonder if I misunderstood her, and it wasn't just an impulsive decision. I honestly assumed we'd argue again, but when she told me about it, I tried to see her point of view. Because I was tired of fighting with her, and couldn't see the point in arguing with her again and over. That was just going to hurt us both. She even asked if I would be willing to consider moving back in with her, and I told her that I would need some time to think about it since I had assumed that I could talk her out of it, which was clearly not the case. When I addressed it, she said she understood, and that I could take as much time as I needed, but that we would eventually have to decide what we wanted to do. Then she returned to packing, and all I could do was sit silently and try to figure out what was happening. Even as she left, she told me that I still had time to decide what I wanted. She wouldn't alter her mind, and if I couldn't take it, she was okay with it as well. It was a lot today, and I found myself wishing I hadn't opened the door to let them in because I wouldn't have known anything, and I guess being angry at her was much easier than having to understand and live with this situation. But now that I understand what's going on, I need to figure out what I want and where my priorities lie. It's been playing with my mind, but I know I'll have to make a decision at some time, and whatever I choose will be difficult. I'll be forced to make some sacrifices, and no matter what I give up, it will still hurt. So, useless. To put it simply, I'm in a very sensitive situation right now, and my position is not easy considering that I have all of my family, friends, and even work here. I realize I'm rambling, but I don't know what to make of this situation anymore. Update 3. After thinking about it for 3 weeks, I phoned Allison and informed her that I would not be returning to her hometown with her. It was a difficult decision for me, but I needed to do what was best for myself. And as I indicated in my last update, all of my friends, family, and even my work are here, and I can't leave everything. Even if I tried to return here every weekend, I couldn't figure out how to make it profitable for my business. And I've spent a substantial portion of my life building this business from the ground up. I have a lot of employees that rely on me, so I can't just pass it on to someone else or sell it and walk away. So, with a heavy heart, I decided not to stay married to Allison since she and I both deserve the freedom to live our lives as we want. When I informed her of my cession after 3 weeks of no communication, she seemed irritated but did not dispute with me. She told me she understood and wished me the best in the future, but she hoped I would forgive her and understand where she was coming from. And while I feel it must have been tough for her to be away from her family for so long, the major reason she left her hometown in the first place was to make a life for herself away from all she knew and her comfort zone. She desired independence and freedom, which she had previously acquired, yet, now that we were both of an age when we want comfort, it was reasonable for her to want to return to her comfort zone. We talked and agreed. We would file for divorce on mutual grounds and end our marriage amicably. But first, we had to determine what we wanted to do for Hannah, who was upset at having to leave me behind. Allison had previously told her not to contact her because she wasn't sure what I wanted, but now she has asked. And I told her that I would love to have partial custody or at least visiting rights because Hannah is someone I've watched grow up over the last few years, and I really want her in my life. I can't help Allison right now, but I also don't want to lose Hannah since I adore her and consider her my own child. I hadn't contacted her yet since I didn't think it was appropriate without first speaking with Allison. But now that we're on the same page, we'll determine what to do, and before that, I'll finally see Hannah after a long time. Update 4. Hello, I've returned from seeing Hannah and Allison, and my heart is full right now. I released my last update 3 days ago, and since then, I was just trying to focus and process the fact that I was getting divorced and Allison would no longer be a part of my life. I thought I had accepted it, but as I thought about it, the more I regretted it. I believe talking to her about it made it more real, but I couldn't break my vow, so I had to suck it up and mentally prepare myself to meet her. But the moment I stepped into her friend's apartment, where she had been staying, I kind of broke down, and so did she, and I understood why we hadn't been seeing one other. We knew that the minute we saw one other, we wouldn't be able to hold back since, no matter how much I wanted to despise her, I couldn't because I loved her. And I believe she does as well, since as soon as we spotted each other, we both exploded. We cried and held each other because it had been so long since our previous meeting. She instantly informed me that she had opted to return to her hometown to be closer to her friends and family, as well as her prior life, but she was now unsure. I was pleased to hear this since it meant we were now on the same page, and she had made the initiative to communicate it to me. After many tears, embracing, and making up, we decided to put all of our plans on hold and attend marriage counseling. If there was still a chance we might work things out and make our marriage work, I was ready to take the risk. I had just gone over to meet Hannah, but I'm glad I was able to settle things with Allison as well. She is now staying with her friend, but she will be packing and preparing to move back tomorrow, and I can't wait for her return. Hannah is clearly delighted that we are not separating and has decided to give our marriage another chance. But of course we can't ignore the fact that all of this sprang from Allison's feeling disconnected from her family, so we've decided to try to see them every weekend rather than every 2 months. We will not make excuses for ourselves, and even if we are really busy with work and other commitments, we must make time for people we care about, as we have learned the hard way. Anyway, I'm pleased we're going to attempt to work things out because I adore her, and knowing she feels the same way is reassuring. Hopefully, counseling will improve things.